Hello everyone and welcome to this MASH session. So whilst so many of us are still knee-deep in the day-to-day challenges that our industry is facing in this pandemic, smart companies are starting to think about post-pandemic bounce back and what that post-pandemic playbook could look like. Now, we all know that lovely saying that says the best way to predict the future is to look to the past. So what I wanted to do today is talk to two hugely experienced global leaders who have led businesses successfully out through previous pandemics. And whilst those pandemics may not have been as challenging as the one we're facing now, there's a huge amount of learning that we can steal and take as we think about how we come back. So I'm delighted to first of all welcome Michael Duck. Welcome, Michael. Michael, congratulations on your recent promotion to Executive Vice President, Commercial Development for Informa Markets. Basically, you're responsible for the world. And thank you for joining us so late. So good evening to you, because Michael is joining us from Hong Kong.
Good to see you again, Ruth.
Likewise. And I'd also like to welcome the crack of dawn, that's not his name, Paul Miller. I'd like to welcome Paul Miller, who is Chief Executive of Questex. And Paul is joining us very, very early in the morning, pre-orange juice from East Coast, US. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Ruth. And hi, Michael.
Hi, Paul. Good to see you again.
You too.
Let's start with you, Paul. Let's kick off. You've managed businesses through a couple of pandemics. Talk about some of the experiences that you've had, that you've seen work. What are the top line rules that we should be thinking about and that we can learn from previously?
Yeah, I think, Ruth, firstly, the pandemics and the other sort of crises that we've managed ourselves through, be it the global financial crisis, the Japanese earthquake and tsunami, which hit us pretty hard and at one point in our history, is that this one truly is global. And I think in the past we've been able to look at pandemics, MERS, SARS, that have been relatively localized, and that has given that those particular pandemics gave us the ability to sort of pivot out of certain regions and focus on other regions of the world. This time it's a little bit different, and it's global. And I think I'm very interested to hear Michael's viewpoint on China, for instance, which has been able to perform and put on events. We really have sort of returned, I think, to the real basics of what we learned in these past kind of crises, but be they local or be they financial, if you will. Firstly is that and I think everybody sort of already knows this, but it's easy to say, harder to do, is that you really have to double down your focus on your clients and your audience. You've got to get much closer to them than the simple, hey, are you coming to our show next year? Or, hey, can we renew you next year? Or, hey, we're going to give you a discount of $10 if you attend for this year's show. I think that's just all completely tone deaf, and you have to get yourself really in your audience's shoes. What's happening to their business? What's happening to their industry? We are at the moment in the travel industry. We're in the hotel industry. We're in the spa industry. They're pretty much closed around the world. And to simply go to them and say, hey, yeah, it's tough, but we're going to do an event next year. Are you coming? Is just not working at all. It's completely tone deaf. So the big learning for me in the past was, this is an opportunity to get much closer to your customers. It's an opportunity to get much closer to your audiences, and don't waste that, because from that comes ideas, from that comes innovation, from that comes creativity, and you end up, I think, navigating your way through in a much closer sort of way to your audience and your clients, and you come out of it with much better product if you can sort of weather the storm. And that's the big if, I think, for a lot of people and companies, is can you weather it? So it's really a chance to go outwards and not sort of do the woe is me inwards stuff. And I think that's what these kind of situations create for us. You have a choice. Is it going to be all about you and how you do your stuff internally, or is it going to be about the markets you serve and trying to do things better for them, whatever it may be. And we could probably talk a little bit about some of those things later.
And it's a real challenge, isn't it? When you've got a client on the end of the phone and you're doing that. You're absolutely right. I'm going to ring you up just to touch base with you. I'm not going to sell anything to you. It's really difficult to fight that urge, isn't it? And actually, you have to. You have to. And I think the events industry in general is very, it can be very transactional and in a good way. And it's right place, right time for the right people. Those things have been taken away from us. There is no right place, right time right now. And so you've got to really start to think a little bit differently. And I mean, just ask them very basic questions. You know, what are your objectives right now as a company? Some people will tell you, I'm just trying to keep the doors open, or I'm just trying to keep the lights on. I've got no money. I'm applying for government help. And frankly, events are the last thing on my mind right now. And that can turn into a conversation of, well, are you still trying to attract customers today or for the future? Because there are other ways to do that. And that sort of gets us into sort of the digital media side of things as well. And that I think is the big learning from the past. If you do it, you're going to come out of this with acceleration as a business. And if you don't, you're going to be really trudging uphill in treacle, I think, because customers, they need empathy right now. People need empathy. Michael, what take from your side of the world?
Well, I don't want to repeat what Paul has said, because all of what he said is extremely valid. My experiences in these crises in the region here have ranged from, as you said, the tsunami. I happened to be in Phuket at the time, and the Indian Mumbai attacks, and during the time we had our shows on. And of course, during SARS here in 2003, which is a similar type of disease to what we've got at the moment, although it was 4 times more fatal than COVID-19. It was not transmitted as easily as COVID-19. Hence, there were only 5 countries and regions that had this. So they were China, Hong Kong, Macau, Singapore, slightly Thailand, and interesting enough, Canada, in Toronto mainly. And it was a very frightening time because we didn't really know where it was coming from or where it was going to go to. And whilst we were all experiencing the anxiety with staff and family and friends and business partners, the rest of the world was still manufacturing goods in China. The ships were still being shipped. And actually, in those days, the planes were still flying. Today, the ships are still going back and forth. And actually, container rates are the highest they've ever been. And strangely enough, the stock exchanges in many places throughout Asia are the highest they've ever been. But for airlines, service industries, it's been an absolute disaster. And we've got 3/4 of the fleet of Cathay Pacific not sitting in Hong Kong, but in a desert near Alice Springs in Australia. It's really changed a lot of things. Hence, the need for that stronger link with our customers. And hence, as you had started to allude to with the working of digital, and how we're able to use digital to make those links even better with our customers around the world. Because as we can't travel anywhere, we've got quarantines in many different countries. If I want to go to China, I have to quarantine in China for 2 weeks in a hotel room provided by the government. And on the way back, I've also got to quarantine for 2 weeks in Hong Kong at another hotel by the government. If I come from elsewhere in the world, I've got to do 3 weeks of quarantine, and that's really not nice at all. Not allowed to go out, not allowed to see people, and it's tough. But we have to have these things at the moment to keep our numbers low, and that's what I'd say the populations in the region here look at in other parts of the world, and wondering why stronger rules are not being in place at the moment. So to be able to tell to the staff and throughout the region, here's a time for you to make your best feelings and communication with your customers it doesn't come around too often, but here is a good time to do it. And whether you do that with email, or whether it's on the phone, or whether you do it with just, so as you say, empathy, that is really very important, and something that you carry with you for many, many years as you build those relationships. And that can be through associations of the industries that you're in, or directly with national pavilion organizers, or with the exhibitors themselves, depending on the size of the shows that you've got. But so communication. That
relationship build isn't just your exhibitors, your sponsors, it isn't just your visitors, it's that holistic community that you have to think about.
Yes, of course, because what we want to do, as you call it, bouncing back, although I don't particularly like bouncing back into things, I to be able to bring the shows back in, and it will come, but it will come in a fairly slow and measured way. They need to be able to be advised how, why, and where they're going to feel safe and less anxious about traveling, and where the buyers are going to be, because at all our shows, wherever the buyers are going to be, that's where the exhibitors will want to be.
So when we start to see that recovery happening, and we start to see shows being planned and being allowed to run, certainly where we are in the UK, Michael, what do you think? What are the key learnings and the key advice you'd give about how you start to get your audience to come back? Let's say we've brought our exhibitors in, we've created those really strong relationships through this very strange period. We've built really strong relationships with them. Now we need to get the audience in. How do we do that?
Well, let me go back to 2003 and SARS and what happened. SARS came about in China and Hong Kong at the beginning of the year, mid to end of January. And we started to have to cancel shows that were in March. And this is where the deaths, fatalities had started, and everyone was in a position of what is going on here at the moment. The time it took to actually come back into the market was actually until about the middle of June, and the period was about 5 weeks of no new cases. And by having that amount of time with no new cases being found, that gave the initial part of the confidence to come back again. Now, we had a show, a jewelry show that was in July, and it was about a third of the size that it usually was. But still, not only did we put it on, but we also got the industry from the region, associations and government and singers, to make it into some sort of a more different and a bit happier sort of position, and had buyers that were either flown in or said, look, we want to be here, this is important to us. So that was when we could actually start to rebuild. So for the rest of the year, we were putting on our scheduled shows, but in a much smaller way until the following year. So it's having to rebuild, and that's what we're doing now in 2021. We're having to try to rebuild the schedules for the shows here in Hong Kong and also in Asia too. So in the UK, we'll probably come onto it, but you've got some really good news at the moment, where you've got over 5 million, or about 5 million vaccinations that have taken place. That is just superb news. In the United States, I think 19 million or so. There are not many places where that's happened. We know that in India, they're going to be vaccinating some 300 million people over the next 3 months. So by doing that, that will give a lot of confidence to people. And that's before we start talking about digital passports, and I hope we can perhaps come onto these sort of things, which give people that confidence and the taking away of the anxiety in terms of the unknown and unsure.
I think your point is really interesting about, there isn't going to be a big bang when everything comes back. There's going to be this gradual return. Paul, I'm interested in your take on this. I was sitting in an industry discussion the other day, and there was a real diversity of opinion where we had some organisers, and they were quite big organisers, saying, we're contemplating not doing shows in 2021, even if we can, because we believe a smaller show will damage our brand. And then we got the opposite end of the scale, which is saying it's going to come back in, it's going to come gradually. We're going to have to win people back and demonstrate that we can run not only safe and effective shows, but also shows where you do business, even if you're looking at an audience that maybe is half the size it was before.
Yeah.
Your take on that?
Firstly, and by the way, I do hear on the calls I'm on, I hear both of those points of view and pretty much everything in between, which sort of, I think, just point to the fact that for the first time in a long while, and probably in my career, frankly, nobody really knows quite how things are going to come back. I don't think it's going to be a linear, smooth line. I think it's going to be quite lumpy. I think it's going to depend on the industry you're in, and it's going to depend on a lot of other things, which I'll chat about. So my viewpoint firstly is that can we please get away from these numbers? This how many people were there? How many square feet did we sell? I think the definition of success has been intellectually lazy. Let me put it that way. And just selling more square feet or just getting 20,000 people through the door is probably not what success looks like if you're an exhibitor. And the only thing we have to do is look at our net promoter scores as an industry to realize that our audiences are not always enamored with what we put on pre-COVID. So this is a break where we have a chance to sort of rethink that a little bit. So I'm not a huge believer in it's all about square feet or large numbers. In some cases that's great. In some cases it actually doesn't matter as much as the right people having the right connections and meetings. The question around the UK and how the UK comes back is a really interesting one sitting here in the US. So one of our parameters at the moment has been how many people are within a one-day drive of the potential show and venue. Well, in the UK, you're pretty much within a one-day drive of almost every venue that you can get to. So that one seems very cultural. Here, people will drive for 12 hours to go to an event. In the UK, I don't think you would drive for 12 hours to go to an event. You might get on an internal flight, but driving from Inverness to London feels like a bit of a schlep. So you'd get on a flight, I would assume. Problem is there are no flights. So in a way, what that leads us to over here, and I don't know if this translates, I just don't know if it does, is that we would probably, and we will, and we have already, we put on a show in Hong Kong actually in December. We will probably do small local events where there is enough of an audience to make it viable, and there are enough clients, and I'll talk about that in a second, because most clients have a local distributor or they have a local sales office. So even if you can't attend with your big 30 by 30 from the Netherlands in San Jose, you probably have a local sales office where we could set up just a pod for you, bring a poster and a salesperson, and you can exhibit. It's just not your brand exhibit you normally have. Our next sort of stage is to say every venue we have must have a broadcast studio. It needs to be investing in a broadcast studio, and it's going to be a determinant if we go to that venue or not. Because the real need here, and I think it's going to be the same in the UK, I don't know, but I think it will be, is that if you cannot come, if you're in a tier 2 region and you can't go to a tier 1 region or whatever it might be, don't worry, we'll broadcast the show to you, and you'll see great content. And of course, you're going to lose some stuff like the networking and the beer at the end of the day with people you don't know, but you'll still be able to get the highlights. We'll still be able to connect you with customers. We'll still be able to set up the meetings. So I think what's global now is that wherever we start to come back and whenever we start to come back, there are going to be certain parts of our customer base and audience base that cannot or will not travel until, as Michael says, it's completely safe to do so, and there are digital passports, et cetera, to allow us to show that everybody in this particular venue is COVID free. And those people still will be able to travel, but others won't who want to go to the show, but they'll want to see what they're missing, we hope. I also think this is going to sort out the wheat from the chaff, to be honest. I think some shows that were hanging in there and were probably in decline before COVID, they're going to be exposed a little bit. So I think people are going to gravitate towards quality. I think there'll be a flight to quality, and there'll be a flight to those events where they feel they're getting something out of it, whatever it is, education, networking, buying experiences. And I think in the UK, it is worth having, again, I don't know if this translates, but it is worth having conversations of, if I'm doing a show in London at Excel, how many of my customers and audience sort of come from within a 2-hour train ride of that show, and from what regions do they come? And I think we're going to have, and we do have, by the way, very sophisticated dashboards on what local governments are doing, what the venues are doing, what's the sentiment of the audience, are they feeling confident or not confident? The one thing I find it difficult to sort of predict in any country right now is sort of how the overall governance is going to change. And as Michael says, and I look with some envy living here in the US, where frankly it has been a complete nightmare at the federal level. I mean, forget politics, there's just has not been any federal approach to COVID. And therefore we have just people traveling over state borders and infection rates going up and down. And I think the difference this time, and where history is not a good pointer, is that we're actually making history right now in terms of how we're responding to this situation. And it's not all helpful trying to lead a business and trying to get things back to some sort of normal. But I'm not worried about size of shows, I guess, is the short answer to your question. I think if we've learned anything over the past 9 months or so, it's that our customers they go to shows to get sales qualified leads, or marketing qualified leads, if you will. And if we can't provide that, then we are not providing value for their money. And the ways we can provide that are not necessarily just at a 4-day live event, that we can provide that, frankly, and have been doing this. It's been a mantra of mine, as you know, for at least a decade, is that you can't go down this events only model. It's not the right way to treat your audience. It's just not. You need to engage throughout the year. So I would encourage every organizer, wherever they are in the world, to really think about what's their database look like, what is the data telling them, and think about quality over quantity. And then the quantity will come back if you've got the right quality there at this show. So that's the kind of, again, does it work in the UK? I think so. I think it's global.
I think there's a real position here where, we know from all of our friendly organizers who are competitors and friends with us, that we are all doubling down on digital and data. So this is no doubt what's happening, and that's going to take us through for several years to come, and it's sped up our relationship and our knowledge and understanding of the digital world and the understanding of data over these next years. However, still, and there's hope out there that the physical event is still extremely popular, and we've got really good evidence of this, where in November at the end of last year, we managed to put on a large B2B event, the only one in Hong Kong of that size, with 4 shows. And within 2 hours, it was as if it was a show in normal days and normal times, a 3-day show. The speed that people came back, they They washed their hands, they cleaned their hands, they took their temperatures, they physically distanced themselves, etc. The stands all had small cubicles with them, etc. We had 20% less visitors, but they were the right visitors, and it was wonderful to feel that can happen. Now in China, as you were asking, Ruth, we've got a lot of our shows still operating. We had a fairly successful year last year in that we were able to have most of our shows, which were about 70% domestic exhibitors and buyers, carry on, and that certainly we're able to run those things. We do it in Japan. We've done some in Korea, also in Thailand, and we just need to be able to bring in the internationals. But however, it's still going on in China today in terms of the business. So although in China the testing is very strong and very good, and also in terms of the facility to have on WeChat a green or a red dot on your phone to show that you've been or haven't been near somebody who's got COVID-19, so that makes it that much easier to come into a venue and you feel safer, is a very interesting progress that we've now got to start building on.
I'm really interested in you talk about this gradual acceleration. We have to buy people back, they'll come back, and then we'll see that acceleration in quantity. And Paul, I think your point is extremely well made. It isn't just about those numbers. There are other numbers. I think we're, as an industry, we're way behind things like visitor ROI. We haven't even really started on those sorts of areas. Yeah. I'm really interested from both of you. You're sitting out there looking in at the UK. We've had a pretty choppy time, to say the least. So there's nothing like a pandemic and a Brexit challenge to come at the same time. You're right, Michael, when you said there's some really exciting things and positive things. There's some worrying things. From both of you, what do you think where are the things that the UK is going to be challenged over the next, let's say, 12 to 18 months? And where are the things where we are really uniquely and positively positioned? And if you can do it in that order, because it would be lovely to get everyone to end on something really positive for once.
Michael, do you want me to go?
Yeah, off you go.
Yeah, this is kind of personal for me because I have two daughters who both attend university in the UK. Well, they're not at the moment. They're actually here with me in the US, but they would like to be at university in the UK. And I think that's sort of relevant to the challenge that you pose, Ruth. So I think the challenge is in some ways unique in the UK. So Brexit brings a challenge that I think we're all trying to get our heads around. At the moment, the headlines sort of veer from the Nissan positive story that we saw this morning all the way through to people being charged €100 for packages that are coming from continental Europe, and isn't that a negative, and pigs' heads rotting in ports and all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of us from the business side are trying to figure out, hey, what does this mean to international visitors? What does it mean to international business? And what does it mean to the UK as a terrific place to hold events and as a center and a magnet for certainly the greater European region, if not the world. So the challenge really is trying to understand what are those longer term impacts going to be. And I frankly, I'm trying to read as much as I can around it. My daughter was meant to be on the Erasmus program in Austria right now, and that's ending, and there's a new thing coming in. So you start to get your head around what is this going to mean to business in general, and how much is the fear mongering going to come true? How much is sort of the positive, nothing's really going to change, going to come true, and what's in the middle? So I think number one, the UK as a business hub, from a global perspective, there's a question mark around that, and that will, in some ways, I think we will find that the more stories like Nissan saying we're in is going to sort of just build confidence and reassure people that, there's some change, but we can deal with it, and we move on. I think some of the other challenges that the UK has is is the kind of regionalization of how the country or even the four countries, frankly, are treating this particular pandemic differently, and even at the county level. And where my parents live in Lincolnshire, they can't they're 17 miles from the Norfolk border and about 10 miles from the Cambridgeshire border. And at one point they were telling me they can't really travel from one county to another. And that does create a real challenge, I think, for us in the event space, because if you can't travel across county, then you're really being forced to be extremely local. But I do think, Michael touched on something that I think the UK should be very proud of right now, and that's the vaccination program. It's again, forget just the sheer numbers, but look at the percentage of the population that's being vaccinated, and the continued sort of approach to getting it out and getting it done. That I think is extremely hopeful, and I think if you combine that with, as Michael said, the digital passport, your cell phone glowing green, and you're into the venue. You combine those two things, and then you add in the UK's almost incredible position in the events industry, which, I mean, we have to accept that. Informa, Reed, Tarsus, et cetera. I mean, the UK is really good at events, and has really managed to export that skill set all over the world. So I think if we're able to retain the talent, and by the way, I think that's a key issue here. If we're able to retain the talent through this kind of lockdown scenario where we're not able to conduct business, you combine that with continued vaccination and the potential to have guaranteed safety. Everybody in this venue has been tested, is negative, or has been vaccinated within the last X hours. I think there's a lot of hope out there, frankly. I really do. It's just it's going to be a pretty dark winter. I mean, that's how it looks. So yes, it's tough right now. But I do think that talent question is really important. And the last thing I'd say on this point is the fact of the matter is, whether we like it or not, the annuity of 4% growth and 35% EBITDA and all that kind of great stuff, and cash up front and all that great stuff that we love about the events business, I think that's going to be challenged. Digital doesn't work that way. I mean, I'm a digital guy in the events industry, as opposed to being an event guy trying to get into digital. And digital is lower profit. Digital is much more exposed in terms of ROI. I mean, there's no place to hide in digital. The numbers are the numbers. You can see how it's working. And digital skill sets are actually very different at the end of the day than true event skill sets. So there's a lot of retraining, a lot of reskilling, a lot of new talent that's got to come into the business. But I do think one of the key areas here for the UK is that it's able to retain that talent in the event industry, because these are good, very talented, creative people. And there's a demand for good, very talented, hardworking, creative people in other industries. And that, I think, is the kind of wild card in the positive. Is if we don't have it, if they go elsewhere, then we're going to find it a bit of a slog.
Thank you, Paul. Michael.
Okay, well, lots there, lots to go. Just before we come on to UK, I'm very proud that we've, in our company and also with Tarsus and Clarion, we're about to start a small show in Orlando, coming together to bring a lot of these tests together and how that's going to work. And it's going to be in 3 weeks' time. So that sort of initiative is really what we want to see, so it can start to build on. Let alone we will be testing with a very large technical company in Las Vegas for digital passports, because we're all going to look to show something that we've been vaccinated or that we have had a recent test. You're not going to get on an aircraft unless the airlines say, have you been tested in some way or the other? You're not going to get, maybe even a train, maybe even a car, who knows, let alone a venue where it's got to go beep and then you come on through. But for the UK, I don't think that we've done anything any worse or too much any better than the rest of the main players in Europe. You look at Germany, that at the beginning of this pandemic said that, okay, we've now gone to Berlin and we've proven to the government that we are not a pop concert and that we are not a mass meeting. We are organized events. And they did that, and then they said they're going to put on the shows, and then they didn't. So it happens in other very good countries as well. And so it goes to show that we need to bring the confidence back. Now, in the UK, I think that Julian Agostini and I had written very eloquently that our business is called the events business, and it makes it sound as though it's like a gymkhana or organizing some weddings. And really, people don't understand, and I'm not just talking about the UK government here, in a lot of countries, except in, say, Germany or maybe in Italy, that the trade show business, the exhibition business, is different, and it does have different factors to it. And we do bring and we do make a lot of other money for other parts of a city or a country. And that really needs to be hammered now into government, who really don't understand what our business is, because really they haven't been explained it properly in the past. And let alone they're fiddling around trying to understand what's actually happening, because they don't know really what to do. But we should be clear, and we should be able to say, we recommend, as the trade show or exhibition industry in the UK, to the government that we take these sort of factors, because if we don't do this, then there's going to be a lot of knock-on effects for the restaurants, for the hotels, for the retail, etc. And that all comes down to something that we haven't mentioned at all at the moment, and that's cash flow. Because without cash flow, that blood in our bodies and that business, it just dies. And I have to say, watching Rishi Sunak give his every 3 months or so, oh, I've got another 100 billion here or 10 billion there, etc., to do this, has been amazing that he's been able to do it. And I think that's led the way in a lot of financial confidence in the country at the moment. And I think a lot of countries actually look at that and say, well, that's, the UK can do that. I think, if we didn't have that, can you imagine what the UK would be like now if you didn't have furlough schemes, if you didn't have that money coming into people's pockets every month or so? It would make it very difficult. So a silver star for UK.
Do you know what I have to say? I was at an industry meeting at the end of December, and we all said Q1 is going to be a bloodbath, and it's going to be depressing. And then I was at another iteration of that meeting in January, and we came out and went, oh my God, Q1's a bloodbath. And we're in this real risk of talking ourselves into a negative. And actually, talking to the pair of you, there's some real positives, and we forget the outside world looking in. And the point of we have the best, with the exception of you two, obviously, the best in the world is based in the UK. I heard a wonderful song this morning, Misha Paris, and there's a line, you have to remember the darkest hour is only 60 minutes long. And I thought that's fantastic. And, we are in the darkest hour, but actually, darkest hour comes before the dawn, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. We are starting to see that recovery. And I'm really, really positive. I'm going to ring you both every day, not at this time, a bit earlier, and sort of talk myself up. So one last thing from the pair of you before I release you. What's your gift to your audience? What's the single thing that you would give to this audience to say to them when you're thinking about your pandemic playbook and how you come back? What's the one gift that you need to remember? Michael, if we could start with you.
Keep your sense of humor. It's important to that the people around you feel that you're not anxious all the time. You've got to have mental resilience. You've got to have patience, because sometimes we don't know how long these things are going to play out. As I said, with SARS, it took a good year this is looking like it's going to take a good 2 years.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe longer. Depends on. I'm an optimist. It's too tiring for me to be a pessimist. But I look at the possibilities, the confidence that vaccinations can do. That will be a big turning point for all of us.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as Michael was talking there. The gift that I think I would give the audience to this particular conversation is that I think it is that we're not really in the events business. Michael just said something around the events business. And frankly, I don't think we ever really were. We're in the business of connecting buyers and sellers. We're in the business of making business happen. And I think the gift is to take that knowledge and to reimagine yourself almost as I'm a person and I'm in a profession that helps connect buyers and sellers and drive the economy. And if there's one thing that the world is looking for coming out of this, it's a sort of a roaring 20s comeback. And hey, when we're all vaccinated, people are going to go crazy. They're going to go to bars and restaurants and fly around the world and what have you. And that may or may not be true. We don't yet know. And again, I think it will be fairly lumpy, as I said earlier. But nonetheless, business wants to get back to business. Your audiences want to buy product. Your clients want to sell product. And the gift is to start to think about, if that's what we do, then let's liberate ourselves from just thinking about that as the annual 4-day event, because people don't just do business at our 4-day events. They go off and they do it in other places. And I think if I can add a second gift, Ruth, which I again, Michael touched on this, and I think it's really important to see Informa, Clarion, Emerald, I think it is, partnering to do Tarsus, sorry, Michael, Tarsus to do events, is something we would have never seen a year ago. We would have, or 2 years ago. In fact, we wouldn't have got those people in the same room unless they were buying each other. So the gift here is that start to think about who you can partner with, who you can to take down some of those barriers that have been in place before. And the gift is to start afresh and to look at what business that we're in, who are our partners, what is the ecosystem. And I think if you're able to do that, not only does your job start to have more meaning, I think just in general, things are going to start to feel, at the end of the day, more in your control. And that's what people need to focus on. What's in your control to make your business, your job much more meaningful and productive. And the stuff that's out of your control, try to spend less time on it. It's miserable. It's miserable spending time on the stuff out of your control. And you're not going to control it anyway. So it's a waste of time. So get focused on what you can control. And that starts with change your mindset, I think. And then we'll start to see how we can collectively come out of it.
Brilliant. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Awesome insight, awesome advice, and actually really nice to chat to two of my favourite people as well into the bargain. So
this is great. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ruth.
Same time tomorrow, I think.
Okay.